If you're not in the right place, go ahead and change. And I'd like to first go over what we'll basically be talking about real briefly. We just don't have enough time. I wish we had a whole day because everybody here on our panel has wonderful stories to tell. We're going to be talking about our family values and not let those be defined by anyone else. How we've all become part of a modern traditional family by creating our own traditions, by learning and struggling and learning how to love and accept and nurture our gay and lesbian loved ones in our families. At the end of the session, we will have questions and answers. So do stick around because we really would like to hear that. We are all part of PFLAG, Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. And I know Jeff talked a little bit about it. The organization started out as a support group many years ago, and it has grown to be an international organization. In Montana, we started about 5 years ago and have kind of floated around the state and picked up people here and there. Holly's the youngest member of our panel up here. And right now, within Montana, our organization has regular meetings in Billings and Great Falls and Kalispell monthly, and hopefully more. We're working on Missoula, we're working on Bozeman. It just takes some parents or some friends that really care and want to get things started. Right now, I'd just real briefly like to introduce our panel. We've got Hank sitting over here, Hank Boland, and Hank is from Idaho Falls. She's the regional director for PFLAG, which takes in Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana, and she's been kind enough to come up here and visit with us and work. We're putting her to work here. She does a lot of work in Idaho Falls. She and her husband got the chapter going, and I'll let her talk more about that later. She has a gay son, Alan.
Yes.
Okay. And right over here is Casey Miller in the middle. And Casey right now is from Billings. He works in Billings. He's born and raised in Montana. And he's going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be gay and young in Montana. Chuck, right here with our matching PFLAG shirts, is a person I'm getting to know better and better. He's my partner and spouse and husband and lover and friend and everything, every other label you can think of. And he's going to talk a little bit about our family and what it's like to have a gay son and gay friends. And Rachel on the end is a very special part of my family. Rach is an Indiana transplant, Notre Dame, and she is in Missoula now. It's my daughter-in-law, and she's going to talk about what it was like to have her sister come out as a lesbian when Rach was in high school. Rach is not far removed from high school as far as I'm concerned.
I feel like it.
It's another perspective as a sibling and what different things that she went through. So, and I'm Corky Smith, and I have to say I have the pleasure of having one of my children be gay. I'm very, very fortunate. I used to start some of these things in sort of like AA, and I'd say, I'm Corky Smith and I have a gay son. It just doesn't have a right tone to it at all. And I really, really celebrate the fact that I have a gay son. I'm just pleased. I didn't know that at the time when he came out, and those are the things that we all have to go through and learn. But I'm very happy. And we want to play a song that really sets the mood for what we all feel and what we're talking about. And I kind of like to dedicate it to our son. I'm starting already, Rachel. I like to dedicate it to my son and to our friends. This is really early. I don't usually do this this early, but it's real special. If I got it in the tape player right.
Imagine the month of Sundays
one cloudy day, imagine the moment the sun came shining through. Imagine that ray of sunshine as you remember your darkest hour, with dawn so far away. Remember the way that you long for morning's light, and think of yourself as a candle in the night. Make believe this is the first day, everything all brand new. Make believe that the sun is your own lucky star, and then understand the kind of gift you are. The gift you are, like the very first breath of spring. The gift you are, all the joy that love can bring. The gift you are, all our dreams come true. The gift you are, the gift of you. You are the promise of all the ages. You are the prodigal son. You are the vision of prophets and sages. You are the only dream of a bright tomorrow. Know that your dream will come true. Carry the dream in a sparkling crystal jar, and then you will know the kind of gift you are. The gift you are, like the very first breath of spring. The gift you are, all the joy that love can bring. The gift you are, all of our dreams come true. The gift you are, the gift of you. The gift you are, like the very first breath of springtime. The gift you are, all the joy that love can bring. The gift you are, all our dreams come true. Yes, baby. The gift you are, the gift of you.
Well, that sort of sets the mood for how we're feeling today and what we're talking about. And we'll start off, I do have to introduce Holly. She is our youngest member. Holly's daddy's practicing for the Missoula Symphony today, so he can babysit. So she may run around and have everybody help take care of her. Excuse me. I have a sign-up sheet that I will pass around if you don't mind signing up as part of the workshop, just so we know who is here. And we'll start with Casey giving you a little history, and we'll just go from here, Casey. And you can just sit there. Yeah, that's fine.
Like she said, my name is Casey Miller. I was born and raised in Montana. I didn't come out till I was a freshman in college. I'd never been away from my parents, so I didn't, you know, living with my parents, I didn't get a chance to see much, you know, staying in Billings. And I got to school and realized that there was something, that I was different. I'd known it throughout high school, but I didn't know what. It took me a while, my freshman year, because I thought, well, I'm away from home, I haven't been in school for a year, it's probably just stress of college. Well, the fall semester got over and I was still feeling the same way. We went into spring semester and it's like, I recognized what it was, but I didn't want to accept it. I found a Lambda group on campus. I went and talked to the advisor. I had her for an English teacher, and she was really cool. I said, I think I'm gay, and she said, well, we do a Lambda meeting. We do have a Lambda group, and I said, yeah, I was kind of curious. I didn't want anybody on campus to know, but I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. Well, I kind of chickened out the first week, and I chickened out the second week. Pretty soon, we were getting real close to the end of the semester. So eventually, she had to just bring the Lambda group to me. We had a party for a magazine I was on, and she said, well, since you wouldn't come to us, we'll bring the Lambda meeting to your party. And so she brought everybody, and I was expecting a lot of freaks, I guess, because I didn't know any gay or lesbian, my teacher. She seemed normal enough, but I thought there were going to be a lot of drag queens, or the typical stuff you've seen on TV, the light and the loafers, and real frilly guys and all this. And I looked around and I couldn't figure out where the Lambda group was. It's like, well, there's Trish, but where's everybody else? And she later brought everybody up to me and it's like, well, you look like everybody else, They were no different. And so that was my first experience with anything that was gay. At that point, I only told her. Nobody else knew. I went home that summer, and my parents knew something was wrong. So I'm always really open to my parents. We don't keep secrets. And I'd stay in my room all the time. My mom couldn't figure out what was going on. She said, well, what's wrong? Nothing. There's nothing wrong. Well, no, you're not coming out to see us. You're holding up your arm. Oh, no, just school. I got out of school, new job. I said, it's just the pressure at work. And, she had to let it go. She knew something was wrong, but she figured I'd tell her in my own time. And up to then, everything was pretty cool. But then I realized, I really didn't like the idea of being gay. I didn't, I'd seen the media coverage of, gay pride parades, and I didn't know anybody other, than a couple students on campus that were gay. So in the process of me getting out of school and telling my mom, I tried to commit suicide twice. I was going to take my car off the edge of the rims in Billings. First time, I got up there and I sat in my car for a couple hours. And I knew something had to be done, because I couldn't live this way. I was leading a lie to my parents. I was leading a lie to myself. And I figured, okay, it's okay, I'll let it go for a while and see how things go. Well, a couple weeks later, I was back up there in the same spot. I really didn't like the concept of being gay. I thought, well, this is getting really stupid coming up here every couple weeks. You're either going to do it and take your car over and just be done with it, or you're going to go back and just live with it and let your family help you. And that's what I did. I sat up there and cried for a couple hours, not knowing who I could turn to, who I could tell. I'd only told one person. I knew that she, and I knew that person wouldn't tell anybody else unless I had given her permission. And so I finally went home, and a couple days later I was painting t-shirts, and I painted a t-shirt with a pink triangle on it that said Pride. And my mom said, well, what's that mean? And my mom's no dummy, as much as she would like to admit that she's not real with it. I knew that she knew. Partially because of what I was wearing, partially because she bought in the book the band played on a couple days before. And up until that summer, she'd never been interested in AIDS or anything like that. And my brother kept saying, you know, Casey's gay. He'd been telling my parents that for years. And my mom and dad said, no, he's not. Yeah, Casey's gay. Well, I think she finally got the hint. And she said, well, what's the t-shirt mean? And I said, you don't want to know. She said, yeah, I do. I said, if you're going to wear it around this house, you're going to tell me what it means. And I finished doing what I was doing. We went outside and said, well, it means I'm gay. And she said, well, let's go talk about it. And so we went out and talked for a while. And she said, you know, I still love you. I still accept you. You're no different than you were 20 minutes ago. She was great about it. Just, she's my best friend. She's told she's my biggest supporter at this point. She joined PFLAG. She's joined Pride, Human Rights Network. She was about one of the only ones I've actually ever told. I told one of my brothers, the one that didn't keep saying I was gay. We were sitting one night out back, and I said, you know, there's going to be a rumor that's going around town that's, you know, somebody's saying I'm gay. And he was saying, you know, he was waiting for the punchline. And he said, so what's the joke? And I said, Rick, there's no joke. I'm gay. And it took him about 20 minutes to realize that we weren't joking and that I was gay. And he said, once he got it through his thick skull that, you know, I'm gay, he said, so, you know, what else? And that's it. That's no biggie. And he didn't care. You know, I was still his younger brother, and I was still screwed up. You know, not screwed up mentally, but I was a screwed up little kid. And really didn't bother him. He didn't, you know, we talked about it, and, you know, he asked if he could do anything. I said, no, you know, everything's cool. My mom went to a counselor, and then she started joining PFLAG. And my dad still didn't know. And she said, you know, you've really got to tell your dad. And I said, no, I said, you know, as much as he's my stepdad. I've taken on his last name, and I've known him since I was 5, but I said, you know, I love Dad to death, but I said, Dad's a redneck, good time. I said, I've seen, you know, last summer when the gay pride came on and he was talking about the queers and the fags on TV, or when we were inside and he's talking about the sand niggers, or, you know, I said, this is, you know, I said, as much as I love him, I said, I can't tell him. She said, well, okay. She said, can I? Like, well, I can't, but yeah, sure, okay. And she held off until I went to school. I said, you know, just be best, and she said, okay. And I went to school, and she told him, she said, he really doesn't care. She said, you know, you took on his last name. You know, he must mean something to you. And she said, he still loves you. He'll still support you. And so, basically, the only people I've actually ever really told were my mom and my brother. I've told a couple of college friends. My mom kind of acted like I was the gay poster child there for a while. She was telling everybody. She told Grandma. So Grandma told everybody. I'm out to the whole damn family. Because I was going to write, last year I was going to send Christmas cards to everybody. I said, you know, I'm just going to throw in a letter to everybody explaining my situation. Mom said, no, Grandma's already explained your situation. It's like, oh, okay. And she said, you know, you do have a couple other gay relatives. Okay, wasn't aware of that. So I went back to school, and we did a little bit more with Lambda. In fact, I got fairly heavily involved with Lambda, trying to get it recognized as a club, which means going before a student senate, saying, I'm gay, you know, let us have a club now. And student senate was really cool, and we began doing stuff on campus. And really, you know, growing up, you know, either straight or gay in Montana, you know, I haven't had that much hatred, you know. Nobody's, you know, I lived on campus for 2 years, you know, coming out to panels like this, usually quite a bit bigger. We do panels on campus, about 30 students, you know, coming out to complete strangers, and nobody said a word, you know. They thought it was really cool. You know, I've only had, out of the 2.5 years I've been out, I've only had one bad incident where somebody did some graffiti on a poster I had. the graffiti didn't bother me as much as I really liked the poster and I couldn't get another one. In fact, it happened on campus, and one of the RAs in my dorm had seen it and was taking the poster down. He knocked on the door and we wouldn't get out. It was too late. And I finally heard somebody take the poster, and it's like, damn, that was a free poster. I really wanted that. And I came out and did my RA take the poster, and he said, you know, I'm going to show it to the RD, the hall director. He said, this stuff, we don't allow this kind of stuff. And so he took this poster to the hall director, who then took it to the president of the college, and the deans, and the housing board, and let them know what was going on. And they took action immediately, you know, talking to these students that had done it. And that was the only thing that's ever really happened. You know, Gay Pride last year, you know, at Helena, when we had picketers, I kind of thought they were kind of funny myself. And then, you know, I come back this summer involved with PFLAG, and now I'm the co-founder of a youth group in Billings. We're hoping that we can help, you know, students, you know, like I was, that were ready for suicide, you know, didn't know how to tell their parents, you know, were too afraid. I guess I should mention, all through school, my real father was supporting me. He was giving me about $1,000 a semester, and he didn't know. I finally told him the fall semester of my sophomore year, or my junior year, actually, yeah. And, you know, I told my mom, I said, you know, listen, I might need some more help from you guys, because I said, I'm going to let Dad know what's going on. You know, I said, I hate to tell him, because, you know, if I lose that financial support, I'm dead meat. You know, and that's why I didn't tell him it was kind of a shitty thing to do, but, you know, $1,000 a semester is $1,000, and that can really help. And so I wrote him the infamous coming out letter. And he called me a couple days later and said, I got your letter. And he said, nothing's changed. And he was the one I was sure wouldn't, you know, take too kindly to this. He said, you know, it's cool. You know, you're still my son. I still love you. And all throughout this process, telling my mom and everybody, I'd read stories, I'd gotten advocate and stuff, and I knew that there was a real good chance that I could be kicked out of the house. That my family could say, you know, we don't condone this. You know, there was a real good chance, but there was still that chance. And my parents have just been great. You know, they're just absolutely fabulous. You know, they support me in anything I do. You know, coming to this, you know, my mom's in PFLAG. You know, family, I guess I just didn't give enough credit to. You know, my family and my friends, I've not had one friend say anything bad about this. I've had one friend, in fact, we were out having coffee one night, and he said, well, so when we double date, how should I address your partners? It's like, okay, I can deal with this, you know. And he said, you know, you're coming to my wedding, do I get to come to yours? I said, well, if you're planning to fly to Hawaii next summer, yeah, you know, sure. You know, or whenever it may be. And, you know, it's really cool, you know, the support system, you know, and to have that has helped me immensely. I guess that's about it.
Casey, thank you. I know Casey said one of the things that he was hoping to get out of the conference was to take back ideas to work with the youth group in Billings. They're trying real hard to get something going there. And he was good enough to sit for our panel, so he's missing two of the workshops right now. But I think by networking and everything, he's going to find some things. There's a group here from Spokane, an Odyssey group that has been going for quite a while. And so I think this is great that Casey could come over. And his mom is wonderful. She made a quilt for the Pride celebration in Billings that we raffled off, a beautiful rainbow quilt. So it's a neat family, and we're sure glad to have you on board. We'll go to Chuck now, and he has his own stories. He usually gets to be the quiet one, but he takes over great when I have tears, so, oops, sorry. So, Chuck?
Well, I come from a different perspective than some of the fathers that we know, because the child in our family that is gay, Corky's son, is my stepson. And so it's a little different than having a biological son. But like so many people, until it came home to roost at our house, I was basically of the notion that if they didn't bother me, I wouldn't bother them. I really didn't have an opinion about the gay community. That changed radically in a hurry. As soon as Aaron came out to us, he came out to his mother first, of course, and we were in our early stages of our relationship, and Corky was extremely apprehensive as how that's going to affect our relationship and how I would receive it. It was not a big revelation for me because I had suspected that Aaron was gay from my association with him, never having said anything to his mother about it, of course. Leave sleeping dogs lie and stir them up. But once he came out, things changed for me in a tremendous way. It's just unbelievable how it changed. For one thing, I became very involved in the gay and lesbian communities, and I've known many gay and lesbian people at this point, and count hundreds of them as my extreme friends. I feel like the gay and lesbian community now is an extended family for me. Everywhere as I go, I run into people that I know and look forward to meeting time after time at associations like this or other meetings. It also allowed me to grow in my association with my community. At the time, I was working in a lumber mill, which gets to be about as big a redneck city as you can get into. You know, I think that's part of the application when you hire on, you got to be redneck. But I walked around there as an electrician doing the work that I had to do, the maintenance work, and wearing a hard hat, of course, in the hard hat areas. And on the top of my hard hat, I had a pink triangle. I had a rainbow flag, and I had another triangle on the front that said, "Not tonight, honey, it's a felony." Well, you would be surprised the interest of this generation. You know, the guys would laugh, and they'd read that, and they'd laugh, and I'd say, "Do you know what that means?" "Well, no." Well, I'd haul out my soapbox, and before we got done, they knew what it meant. The laws in the state of Montana are very discriminating. How that worked. So my association with the gay and lesbian community has been wonderful. I now, 2 years ago, found out that I have a lesbian niece and I have a gay nephew, both of whom I hadn't seen. Well, the nephew I had not seen before. He was born after I left their immediate family. And the niece I hadn't seen in 20 years, and now I have more of an extended family. Neither one of them are accepted by their parents, and so I've kind of taken over that role. And it just goes on and on and on. I love being accepted by the community. It's kind of strange, you know, I'm a white male and in a middle-class family, and basically I'm a minority when I'm amongst the gay and lesbian community. So it gives you a whole different perspective there when you look at it. It's great. I love it. Thank you for listening to me.
I'll be short there. Okay. Chuck and I were lucky enough too just to get back from visiting our son and his partner John. So we have another son back there now as far as we're concerned. They showed us a great time in New York, and it felt real good to us to be in a place where everybody was walking together no matter what gender. Everybody could show their love for each other, and it was kind of scary for me to come back here because I just thought we'd feel isolated again. But I also feel that it's coming, it's closer than it's ever been, and I realize how frustrating and how much time all this takes. But things like this conference and folks like that we have within our group are helping. It just felt really good to be with people in an area that everybody could love each other no matter who they were, and it was accepted and actually really nurtured. Rachel, I have a tiny story to tell about, and I love it. she and my son got together in kind of a unique way. My son Stephen still attends the university here, and as you probably know, it's very hard to get a rental. And he was looking for a rental and finally went to the paper and had to answer one of those roommate wanted things. And his brother had been out to him for a couple of years as being gay. But I think Steve still had a long ways to go with learning about this. And so he answered this rental ad, and he called me up and he said, oh, I finally found a place. This was like 2 days before classes started. I finally found a place. It's with this guy. He's got this great 2-bedroom apartment. And you know, I think he's gay. Well, I'm thinking to myself at that time, before that, Steve wouldn't have considered rooming with him. And Steve's a nice kid, but Steve was raised like the rest of us were, with a lot of ideas that society puts in our mind. And at this time, it was like fine with him. He was going to rent that apartment. So they became roommates, Bob and Steve, and Bob never came out to Steve, but at all. Bob still doesn't know. But you change babies here. But anyway, Bob had some friends, and women friends, a lesbian couple. They were very good friends, used to go camping and stuff together. They'd come over to the apartment all the time. Well, Bob moved out, and the gals moved in with Steve as a roommate. And it happens to be that one of the lesbians had a sister who she said, oh, Steve, you've just got to meet her. She's back in Indiana, and you'll just love her. And Steve's like, oh, right. You know. So Rachel came out to visit, and Steve met her, and they had this rather quick, brief meeting of, what, a week or so?
It was about 10 days.
Yeah, she can't remember, really. So it was great. And she went back home again, and he stayed out here. And Rachel came out again, not too much later. I think this was for like Christmas or spring or something. And anyway, Rachel and Steve became a couple. And we just look at it as another blessing, somehow brought about by the gay community. Now, you have to pull this together any way you want to, but if she had not had, probably, her lesbian sister, then she wouldn't have been friends with Bob, and Steve wouldn't have met her, and on and on and on. And it was just a really funny circle, the way that they met. So when they got married, we had a real blessed wedding, because we had a gay man for best man, Steve's brother, and a lesbian for maid of honor. And it was really, really special. And then we also feel that Holly has the best of two worlds, because she's being raised with lots and lots of love, and it's coming from everywhere. So with that, I'll let Rachel go on. We're just so lucky to have her.
The only thing with the wedding was that Aaron wanted to wear the dress and Becky wanted to wear the tuxedo.
Yes.
But they went our way. My name is Rachel, and my sister Becky is a lesbian. She came out when I was a freshman in high school. It was probably 4 weeks into my freshman year. And everybody, if everyone can remember, when they were a freshman, they wanted to make a good impression and be popular. And when she came out, I was very angry at her. I was mad because she was doing this to me. She was going to ruin my reputation. No one was going to like me. It was all about me. I was real mad at her. I had another sister between Becky and I, and she was a junior. And she was pretty much in the same boat that I was. And anytime anyone would say that, you know, well, I hear your sister's a lesbian, or I hear your sister's gay, we would, you know, threaten to beat them up if they ever repeated it, that kind of thing. We were real against it. And as time went on, things got more and more relaxed, and we just, for a long time, we, you know, did the Catholic thing and just, you know, if you, you know, ignore it, it will go away. And we hoped that that would work, and that didn't work. And within my years in high school, I met a girl named Jenny, and her and I became best friends. We were best friends for about a year, and she lived with her mom and her stepdad, and she always talked about her father with a lot of anger, and she was always real mad at him and how worthless he was, and she would go on and on. One day I was at her house, and he had called from Indianapolis and said that he couldn't make it up this weekend. He had some business meetings and he couldn't get out of them, and she hung up on him and went into this awful tantrum, throwing things, cussing him out, just on and on and on. And I finally said, Jenny, what is wrong? Why do you hate your dad so much? Well, he was never there for me. I said, well, you know, he's there for you when he can be. He's a vice president of a company. He's a busy guy. And she finally blurted out, well, who cares? He's just a faggot anyway. And then I started laughing because I didn't think that anyone else had that problem with their family. I thought it was just mine. And I said, well, my sister's a lesbian. And then she sat down and started crying because she realized that it wasn't just her family. We had somehow found each other, and through high school, her and I stuck together and helped each other out a lot. A lot of kids would ask us and question us and want to know what was going on, and it was really none of their business. And her and I went from just ignoring the questions to just flat out saying, yeah, so, you know, are you interested in dating them or something? Why are you so curious? And since that time, I've gotten to where I am. My sister has been out now for 10 years. I just realized that last night. It's been 10 years, and it's been a long, long journey. And the rest of my family, my other sisters, they accept it and they love her, and they always have. But they're not quite to the point that I am, and I think it's because I'm just a more open person and can talk easier to other people. They just don't talk about it. My mother talks about it more than they do, but not very much. I don't think she knows where to go or what to say or who to talk to, but she's very supportive of my sister. And my father is kind of distanced from our whole family. My parents are now divorced, and but he does accept my sister, and he does support her. However, he hasn't spoke to her or I for like a year and a half. There's my husband. And I guess the final thing that I want to say is that I feel that everything that we're doing is working and is going to come full circle within the next generation, because my daughter is the luckiest girl in the world, no matter what she is. If she's a PhD in physiology or a manager of McDonald's for her whole life, no matter who she loves, her family will still love her.
That was the fastest I've ever heard Rachel say
And I didn't cry.
I know.
I almost did talking about Holly.
Time, but yeah, it's she's just great. I really appreciate her putting her time into this, and thank you for having Holly here too, because it wouldn't have worked otherwise. Stephen and Rachel and Holly really represent a neat family to us, because they really do speak out, and that makes a lot of difference, because every time somebody hears something from someone that knows firsthand, it makes a difference, and it helps all of us come out more. So they're real special, and as she said, Holly's going to be raised with a lot of good things, and she's still going to have to be defensive, and knowing Holly, I think she'll be aggressive about it, so I'm not real worried. So when little kids say things, and little kids are going to learn from Holly, I think. Next we have Hank, and we're rolling along here pretty fast, so we will have time for questions and answers. Hank has a little bit to tell you about herself, and then also something special that she's going to do, and a story to read to us.
Well, I was a first grade teacher, and once you're a first grade teacher, I don't think you ever get over that. It's sort of like being gay or lesbian, I guess. I'm stuck with it. My husband's sitting in the back of the room. I'd like to introduce him because he's usually pretty quiet. Jim? Our son came out to us 8 years ago, but he talked about it to me off and on all through college. Couldn't decide himself whether he could accept this or not. And I appreciated your story, because one day he called and said he had bought a gun. He could never be what we wanted him to be. And that shot me into action. And so I have catapulted along the journey from being the parent of a gay man to being the regional director for Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, and now on the National Board of Directors for PFLAG. And they talked me into doing that because they thought rural America needed a voice. And I couldn't turn that down. So I'm going to represent the Northern Rockies region on the National Board for PFLAG. And Montana is doing so many wonderful things. Your youth group and other things that I heard you mention. And it's important to share those ideas with people in other states. Idaho has no pride organization. I'm so impressed with the things that Pride does, because we live in a very Mormon area in the state. The only outlet that gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people have is our PFLAG meeting. And I guess that's one reason it's so very important to me. And they say they come once a month to get their fix. That means the hugs they get from parents, and of course we learn from them. I'm going to read you a story, and then I have something to give you as a remembrance from PFLAG. This is by Dr. Seuss. Now the star-bellied Sneeches had bellies with stars. The plain-bellied Sneeches had none on theirs. Those stars weren't so big, they were really so small. You might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-bellied Sneeches would brag. We're the best kind of Sneeches on the beaches. With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. We'll have nothing to do with the plain-bellied sort. And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking. When the star-bellied children went out to play ball, could a plain belly get in the game? Not at all. You only could play if your bellies had stars, and the plain-bellied children had none upon theirs. When the star-bellied Sneeches had Frankfurter roasts, or picnics, or parties, or marshmallow toast, they never invited the plain-bellied Sneeches. They left them out cold, in the dark, on the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near. And that's how they treated them, year after year. Then one day, it seems, while the plain-bellied Sneeches were moping and doping along on the beaches, just sitting there, wishing their bellies had stars, a stranger zipped in the strangest of cars. "My friends," he announced in a voice clear and keen, "my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean, and I've heard of your troubles. I've heard you're unhappy, but I can fix that. I'm the fix-it-up chappie. I've come here to help you. I have what you need, and my prices are low, and I work at great speed. And my work is 100% guaranteed." Then quickly, Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine. And he said, "You want stars like a star-bellied Sneech? My friends, you can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard." So they clambered inside. And then the big machine roared, and it clonked, and it bonked, and it jerked, and it burped, and it bopped them about, but the thing really worked. When the plain-bellied Sneeches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars at the start. "We're exactly like you. You can't tell us apart. We're all just the same now, you snooty old smarties. And now we can go to your Frankfurter parties." "Good grief," groaned the ones who had stars at the first. "We're still the best Sneeches, and they are the worst. But now how in the world will we know," they all frowned, "if which kind is what? Or the other way round?" And up came McBean with a very sly wink. And he said, "Things are not quite as bad as you think. So you don't know who's who? That is perfectly true. But come along with me, friends. Do you know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best Sneeches on beaches. And all it will cost you is $10 each." "Belly stars are no longer in style," said McBean. "What you need is a trip through my star-off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off your stars, so you won't look like Sneeches who have them on theirs." And that handy machine, working very precisely, removed all the stars from their tummies quite nicely. And then with snoots in the air, they paraded about, and they opened their beaks, and they let out a shout. "We know who was who, now there isn't a doubt. The best kind of Sneeches are Sneeches without." And then, of course, those with stars all got frightfully mad. To be wearing a star now was frightfully bad. And then, of course, old Sylvester McMonkey McBean invited them into his star-off machine. And then, of course, from then on, as you probably guess, things really got in a horrible mess. All the rest of that day, on those wild, screaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie kept fixing up Sneeches, off again, on again, in again, out again. Through the machines, they roared round and about again, changing their stars every minute or two. They kept paying money, they kept running through until neither the plane nor the starbellies knew whether this one was that one, or that one was this one, or which one was what one, and what one was who. Then, when every last cent of their money was spent, the fix-it-up chaplain packed up, and he went. And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. They never will learn. You can't teach a Sneech. But McBean was quite wrong. I'm quite happy to say that the Sneeches got really smart on that day. The day they decided that Sneeches are Sneeches and no kind of Sneech is the best on the beaches. That day all the Sneeches forgot about stars, whether they had one or not, upon dollars. And I just want to give each of you a star, so to remember how important you are. And especially the panel.
Thank you, Hank. She's really been on a whirlwind this year with the board and the regional directorship, and she goes to meetings all the time. And Jim, her husband, likes to travel. He really has to do it now because he's a great chauffeur, and they go around in their motorhome everywhere, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana. They keep trying to pick up folks and get them to start chapters, and they're just doing a really good job. It means a lot to have that touch when you live somewhere that you don't even know this organization exists, and you don't know that there's any other families with gay members. It's really nice to have somebody come and say, hey, we're here, and we're gonna help you do this. So thank you, Hank, very much. It's difficult for all of us to kind of put all this in a nutshell because there's so many different stories, just as there are with you. And so far the keynote speakers have covered some wonderful things that we all touch upon, and it doesn't matter if we're straight or gay, if we're family members, or if we're just friends of people that are gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender. We all need to come out, and it's different when I'm speaking with, say, a group of folks that are lesbian or gay, or if I'm speaking with counselors that are going to deal with these issues. The difference is the safety zone and some of the vulnerability that's felt. And I think it's really important for us as family members or people dealing with the public, not as a gay and lesbian person, to stress this to them, that to speak up about everything. We find with our own friends that they avoid talking about what we do. So we have a real new circle of friends in the past 5-6 years. The folks that we thought were our friends might like us, but they don't like parts about us. So we just don't really associate anymore. And it's amazing that keeps unfolding, but as we lose 1 or 2 friends that way, we gain 20 or 30 friends other ways, which is much, much better. And I think it's just important for all of us to realize how much it means to speak up about everything in our lives and to hopefully feel strong enough to do that. I often ask counselors and teachers, administrators and things to take a sign. We have it over here called All Are Welcome Here, and put that up in their window. And it's sad that a lot of them can't do that. They don't feel safe enough to do that. But those are available. We also have some things on this table Hank has brought and we've brought that are just samples of resources for youth, resources for people dealing with youth and dealing with sexuality issues. Feel free to look through those. There are some things to go ahead and take. You can tell the difference. If there's only one, you can't take it, but we might loan it to you. And then on the back, there's a lot of publications, and there's some samples of books, and we also loan those out. So if anybody wants those, just let us know. I just don't think we can get enough out there. I often tell kids that take PFLAG material, they want it for their parents, and they say they'll never read it, but we'll take it. And I really tell them that the parents will read it. It just might be 2 or 3 in the morning in the bathroom, and they will read it. It's just you have to have it available. It's really important to have it there. And when our son first came out, it was real hard for me because I didn't have any resources and I didn't have anywhere to go. And we lived in this little tiny town with a library that you would never go, and not only you wouldn't go and ask, but you wouldn't get anything out of there about being lesbian things. So it's really hard if I had just had one thing, which Aaron did send me. He sent me things, but the other folks, we get phone calls that, you know, they have no resources whatsoever. So we need to get those things out. Another thing to think about right now, and I'm trying to kind of pull a little bit together here, is this is the holiday season, and as was mentioned in Jeff's speech, it's maybe a hard time to come out, but this is also what we find is the time that people do tend to come out to their families. That's when our son came out. In November, he said he could not stand to go through another Christmas and not have us know who he was. And he couldn't stand another Christmas and talk about the weather. So it was really important to him. But PFLAG itself gets more calls this time of year from now through New Year's. And it's kids coming home, adults. When I say kids, that might be 45-year-old people coming home to their families and wanting to come out. Or families whose kids did come home on Thanksgiving Day with the turkey, you know, and told them. So it's just a real hard time of year, but it's a good time too, because I think a lot of good things happen. We were real lucky that Aaron came out to us. It was a blessing, and it's very special. When we just visited with them, we had a dinner party. Aaron threw a dinner party in his apartment, and they had several friends over, and it really struck me that these young people that are in their mid-20s to mid-30s are all working in New York, making their lives there, and you know, if you could say successful, whatever, they're happy there. But 3 out of 4 of the people that were at this dinner gave me their name and address so that I could send them PFLAG literature for their parents, because they are not out or they're not comfortable. Their parents won't talk about it. And I look at that and think that their folks don't know what they're missing, but at least they're working toward it. It's just really hard. I think at this point we'll just open this up to questions and answers, and if you're comfortable enough to ask anything, I know our panel will set their own boundaries on what they'll answer, but I don't think there's much they won't answer, if it's any help at all. And Hank too, so sure, you know, we all kind of come from something different, so, or comments or anything.
Is it Casey from Donuts?
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about that your stepdad was kind of redneck and made a lot of. So that after you came out to him and that was okay with him, right? It's the way you express it. Then, what was your impression then about who he is? In other words, was his all that redneck stuff part of a pose that he needed, or what? How do you split the difference between his saying you're okay with me?
We talked about it afterwards, we've had a couple family discussions, and he said, I never even realized what I was saying, because most of the stuff we'd seen was on TV. He said, I didn't mean it, but he said, that's the way I was raised, and he's changed, 180 degrees, Wouldn't march with us, in Billings at the march, but, if something comes up, he works for U.S. West, and they have a gay and lesbian group, and he thinks it's cool, and anytime, we need help, he's been there for us. He had no idea what he was saying, and he's apologized profusely, and so our relationship's, on a totally different level than it used to be.
And then you're working with a lot of blue collar folks. You were saying, in one of the mills or other places like that. Did you, looking back now, what was and you said, well, I get out my soapbox and I talk to these folks. what would be your take realistically on the learning factor for those folks who were, you know, seeing you and hearing you?
Number one, I don't think I ever experienced any negative attitudes as far as where I was at. If anything, I think respect level in the group of people that I worked with, the respect for me went up. I think it's also a case of once you put a name and a face to a person, it's very difficult to be bigoted or to hate that person. And so my feelings, and in my workplace, how much of what I said was taken to heart and actually expounded on by them, I have no idea. If it changed any one of them, even an iota, it was worth it. And I think my philosophy on that is that, kind of like U.S. West, reach out and touch somebody. Because if you make them aware, it's hard to put that aside. They might try it, but it might surface again a year down the road, 2 years down the road, and they'll take it out and examine it again. Maybe at the time that they finally get to meet a gay or a lesbian person, that they would take the back out of their closet and look at it. So my philosophy is really reach out and touch people.
One thing too I need to make clear is that this has not been overnight for any of us that are working with PFLAG. It takes a long, long time. Some people can just jump right into it and make phone calls and go to meetings and do all sorts of things, but it took us a long time to get to certain points. And Aaron was out to us about, I think, 3 years before we ever told my parents. And we knew, I mean, when we kept telling them we work on human rights issues, and my dad, who was a terribly narrow-minded, cold person, truly, very Republican, very conservative, would say, "Are you working for Clinton?" You know, and I'm like, that's not exactly it, Dad. But it took us a while. First, Aaron didn't want to deal with it because he wasn't near them, and then secondly, we didn't want to rock the boat. So we can't, you know, it's like we do things now and we're out marching and doing all this other stuff, but we weren't always doing that. And it's real important for folks that are new to this to understand that there's stages and steps. And as Jeff had said, you know, it's a slow process, whether coming out as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, or coming out as a parent or friend. It's slow, and we're still coming out to people. And when Chuck talks to someone at the mill, we might not talk to him about anything important for a year, but something will come up. And it's amazing sometimes what happens or what little comment they'll make, which has been neat for us to see. We're as impatient as anyone else, though. We want it now. You know, we don't want people to have to think and learn. We just want them to know. And oftentimes when our kids come out to us, it's taken them years and years to come out to us, and then they want us overnight to be just fine with it. And it just takes a long time. But it helps. Every little tiny thing has helped a lot. And we have friends that do deal with it and ask us questions. And actually with my parents, it took a few years before they finally brought something up. And we were 1,000 or 1,400 miles apart. We didn't see them much. But finally, they were able to ask questions. And if we'd have pushed it, it wouldn't have worked. So we did have to do it slowly. There's just all sorts of ways.